You know, some cars are just transportation. They get you from A to B, but every once in a while, a car comes along that's a total revolution on wheels. Today, we're talking about one of those, the Citroën DS. It was a car so far ahead of its time, people said it must have fallen from the sky. And to really get why, we have to start with a story about survival.
Okay, picture this. It's Paris, 1962. The French president, Charles de Gaulle, is in the back of his official car, a black Citroën DS. They're flying down the road at 70 miles an hour, heading for the airport. And then, out of nowhere, an ambush.
12 gunmen just open fire. They unleash a storm of bullets at the car. We're talking 140 rounds. The rear window explodes, bodyguards are hit. The car is just completely riddled with holes.
But here's the critical part. Every single one of the car's tires is shot out. Instantly, the big Citroën lurches into a skid. It should be a sitting duck. It should have been over. Or, so it seemed.
So you have to ask, right? No tires, under heavy gunfire? How in the world did President de Gaulle and his wife just drive away, completely unharmed? Well, the answer wasn't luck. The answer was the car itself.
Even though the car was skidding all over the place on 4 flat tires, the chauffeur somehow wrestled back control, floored it, and sped away from the ambush on the car's bare rims. And the only reason that was possible was the DS's absolutely incredible suspension system, which kept the car level and controllable. De Gaulle knew it too. He later said, point blank, that the Citroën DS had saved his life. To understand that miracle, we've got to jump back 7 years. It's 1955. Think about the cars of that era. Big, heavy things with the body just bolted onto a steel frame. They had pretty basic suspension and old-school drum brakes. And then, at the Paris Motor Show, this thing shows up. Next to everything else, it literally looked like a spaceship had just landed. The public reaction was just insane. I mean, nobody had ever seen anything like it. In the first 45 minutes alone, they took 749 orders. By the end of that first day, the number had rocketed to 12,000. That was a sales record that stood for 60 years.
The philosopher Roland Barthes, he really nailed the feeling everyone had that this car was something otherworldly. And its name, DS, well, that's a clever play on words in French. You pronounce it déesse, which means goddess. And for a world used to the cars of the 50s, it really felt like a goddess had arrived.
So how did this goddess work its magic? The secret was this revolutionary, high-pressure hydraulic system. It was the brainchild of an engineer named Paul Magis who, get this, actually developed the whole concept in secret during World War II.
The absolute heart of it was the hydropneumatic suspension. So instead of clunky steel springs, it used these special spheres filled with nitrogen gas and hydraulic fluid. The gas acted like a spring, which gave the DS its legendary magic carpet ride. The system was also self-leveling, meaning the car never sagged no matter how much you loaded into it. Oh, and the driver could even raise or lower the car's height with a lever.
I mean, just look at this table. It shows you just how massive the leap was. While other luxury cars had solid axles and drum brakes, the DS had a self-leveling suspension, power steering, and advanced inboard front disc brakes, which were way more powerful. It was basically a modern car that just showed up 20 years early.
And here's the truly radical part. One single hydraulic pump, driven by the engine, powered almost everything. The suspension, the powerful brakes, the super light power steering, and even the clutch for the semi-automatic gearbox. It was a level of integration that was just unheard of. A massive, massive engineering gamble that paid off in a spectacular way. All that revolutionary tech wasn't just hidden under the hood. It's the very reason the car looked the way it did. This was not a case of style for style's sake. The DS's shape was a direct result of its engineering.
The designer, Flaminio Bertoni, was actually a sculptor, but his work here was all about science. That teardrop shape was incredibly aerodynamic. The covered rear wheels, they weren't just a quirky style choice, they made the airflow smoother. And that beautiful single-spoke steering wheel, that was a safety feature designed to protect the driver in a crash.
The DS was so advanced, you'd think it was perfect. But Citroën, they weren't done. 12 years after its debut, in 1967, they decided to give the goddess a new set of eyes. And trust me, they weren't just for show.
Now, this is just brilliant.
The car got these new directional headlights. The inner set of lights were actually linked to the steering wheel, so they literally turned to light up the road as you went around a corner, and they could pivot up to 80 degrees. For perspective, most modern adaptive headlight systems today only pivot about 15 degrees. It's incredible.
So from saving a president's life to lighting up the future, the DS's influence is just huge. It went way beyond its shocking debut. It proved that if you were bold enough, you could create a car that was beautiful, comfortable, and also unbelievably capable.
Now, you might think a car this complex would be fragile, right? But you'd be dead wrong. That amazing hydropneumatic suspension was perfect for going crazy fast on terrible roads. It made the DS an absolute rally monster. It won the famous Monte Carlo Rally twice, and even conquered the brutal London to Sahara Rally near the end of its life. All told, it stayed in production for 20 years, and nearly 1.5 million of them were made. From its birth as this futuristic icon to its final bow in 1975, the DS just never stopped pushing the boundaries of what a car could be.
So here's the crucial point, the final stamp of approval. At the end of the century, a global poll was held to name the most influential car ever made. The Citroën DS placed third. The only cars that beat it? The Ford Model T, the car that put the world on wheels, and the Mini. That is the legendary company it keeps.
The DS was so much more than a car. It was a statement of pure engineering courage. It took enormous risks, cramming all these unproven technologies into one breathtaking package. And that really leaves us with one last question. In today's world of safe bets and tiny updates, has any car since dared to be so completely, so wonderfully, and so beautifully brave?